The sun had begun its slow descent into the horizon, casting a warm amber glow through the massive glass windows of the Marlowe Gallery. A beacon of elitism in the city's arts district, the gallery had been the pride of its owner, Gregory Marlowe. With his polished, expensive suit, silver cufflinks, and a haircut so meticulous it could slice glass, Marlowe was a man who believed in a very specific kind of art, the kind that hung in posh, private collections or graced the walls of renowned museums. He wasn't one to entertain amateurs or, worse, so-called modern artists who didn't understand the classics. Today, as he paced in the gallery's sleek lobby, he was preparing for another round of art showings. The gallery had scheduled an exclusive viewing of what Marlowe considered to be some of the finest works the world had ever seen, creations of rich oil on canvas that evoked timeless elegance. It wasn't a surprise to him when the gallery was full of people who admired his curation. But even so, Gregory had grown bored. He was waiting for someone whom he hoped would add to the prestige of his collection. That person was a young black artist named Elias Taylor, whose work had appeared on his radar recently after a recommendation from one of his wealthier clients. Marlowe wasn't sure what to think of the artist at first. Elias wasn't an artist in Marlowe's traditional sense, no classical training, no refined background, no elegant brushstrokes that fit the gallery's usual theme. From what Marlowe had heard, Elias was an enigma, self-taught, raw, and unapologetically bold in his artistic expression. His pieces were vibrant, chaotic, abstract, often reflecting deep, unsettling emotional intensity. Marlowe thought little of him. The art world had a habit of producing occasional flashes of talent that quickly fizzled out, and he suspected Elias would be another one of those failed experiments. So, when Elias finally arrived at the gallery that evening, the pompous gallery owner didn't think much of it. In fact, he was eager to dismiss him outright. The door opened with a soft chime and in walked Elias. At first glance, he seemed out of place in the sterile, high-end environment. Wearing a simple black hoodie, a worn leather jacket, and jeans that had clearly seen better days, he certainly didn't fit the picture of the well-heeled art buyer or artist Marlowe was used to. But something in Elias's demeanor caught Gregory's attention. There was an unshakable confidence in the way he walked, a purposeful energy that suggested this man wasn't here for approval. He was here because he knew his worth, whether Gregory recognized it or not. Elias's eyes scanned the room, taking in the modern art pieces hanging from the walls, the delicate sculptures standing in glass cases, and the crowd mingling around the refreshments. Despite the grandiosity of the space, Elias didn't seem intimidated. If anything, he looked slightly bored. He was here on a mission, and his mind was fixed on something more than just the art itself. Gregory adjusted his tie, straightened his posture, and stepped forward, extending his hand for a handshake. "Mr. Taylor," he greeted in his typical cultured voice. "I'm Gregory Marlowe. Welcome to the Marlowe Gallery." Elias smiled briefly and shook his hand, his grip firm and unapologetically strong. "Elias Taylor. Thanks for having me." Marlowe couldn't help but notice Elias's dark brown eyes. They were sharp, piercing, and radiated a calm authority that seemed to challenge the pretentious air of the gallery. It made Gregory uncomfortable, but he quickly masked his discomfort with his usual superior smile. "I assume you've had a chance to take in some of the pieces on display?" Gregory asked, hoping to steer the conversation towards something he could control. Elias nodded, glancing briefly at the works on the walls. "Yeah, they're impressive," he said, his voice laced with an indifference that Marlowe found both confusing and irritating. "But I think I'm here to show my work, not to admire others." Gregory raised an eyebrow. "Ah, yes, of course. I understand you're interested in possibly displaying your art here?" His tone was polite, but there was a certain coldness to it. "I have to admit, your style is rather unconventional. Not at all like what we're accustomed to showcasing, but I'm sure we could make an exception if your work is truly worthy." Elias's lips curled into a faint smirk. He could sense the subtle patronizing in Gregory's voice, the assumption that his art would be nothing more than a curiosity at best. "I'm not here to beg for an exhibition," Elias replied. "I'm here because I was told you might be interested in buying a piece." Gregory's eyes narrowed. Buying, he echoed. I believe you're mistaken. You see, this gallery represents art, not the sale of mere trinkets. He gestured to the collection of priceless pieces surrounding them, dismissing the notion of an artist coming in to sell work. We don't just sell, we elevate. Our clients expect high-value pieces, timeless works that resonate with a certain sophistication. Elias didn't flinch. Instead, he took a step forward, narrowing the gap between them, his expression unreadable. Well, then, he said quietly, maybe I should remind you that art's value isn't defined by its price tag or its reputation. It's in the message it carries, the emotions it invokes, the impact it makes. Gregory's smile faltered for just a moment. He had heard similar claims before, art students waxing philosophical about meaning over aesthetics. Still, he continued to play his role. Of course, Mr. Taylor. Your work might have value. But I'll be the judge of that. He motioned for Elias to follow him to a back room where he kept the more intimate pieces, works of art meant to be seen by the privileged few. As they walked past the main gallery, Elias's gaze lingered on a large, abstract painting of swirling blues and reds. The piece had been painted by a famous, but now deceased artist. The price tag? A cool $5 million. Gregory followed his line of sight, eager to show off the collection of similarly high-priced items. You see, Gregory began, his voice full of pride, art, like all things, is an investment. The right pieces hold their value, while others fade away into obscurity. Only those with true taste can see the difference. He shot Elias a sidelong glance, waiting for a reaction. Instead of the awe or respect that Gregory had expected, Elias simply nodded. Right, he said, almost absently. But let's see if you can see the difference in my work. Marlowe opened the door to the back room, where a canvas sat draped beneath a silk cloth. As he pulled it away, the room was filled with an explosion of colors, sharp lines, vibrant yellows, and deep blacks clashing together in a wild cacophony of shapes and emotions. It was a modern piece, an abstract that conveyed pain, struggle, and ultimately, triumph. The gallery owner's expression shifted. His lips tightened as he took in the piece. He paused. It's bold, I'll give you that. But, it's all over the place. There's no real form or discipline in it. Elias watched him, his face unreadable. He had expected the rejection, but not this. Not the quick dismissal, the casual assumption that his art was just another experiment that would fade away. That's exactly the point, Elias said softly. Art isn't about fitting in. It's about pushing boundaries. Gregory shook his head, clearly uninterested in such philosophy. Well, I'm afraid I'm not sure how this would fit into the gallery's vision. But thank you for stopping by. Elias met his eyes, the briefest flicker of amusement passing through them. You'll see, he said quietly. You'll see. And with that, he turned and walked out of the back room, leaving Gregory standing in the midst of his gallery, wondering if perhaps he had just overlooked something extraordinary. As the door to the Marlowe gallery clicked shut behind Elias, Gregory stood motionless in the back room, staring at the canvas. The bold strokes of red, yellow, and black seemed to mock him in their chaos. What had just happened? The gallery owner had seen countless pieces of art, many of them hailed as groundbreaking in their time. He had the trained eye to recognize what would make money, what would impress clients, and what would fade into obscurity. So why was he having trouble dismissing Elias Taylor's painting so easily? It was just an abstract mess, a hodgepodge of color and confusion. No elegance. No refinement. No sense of sophistication. He gritted his teeth and shook his head, as though trying to rid himself of the lingering uncertainty. It's just a phase, he muttered to himself. A gimmick. Nothing more. Marlowe turned away from the canvas, as if the art itself might somehow infect him with its disorderly chaos. He needed to focus on what was important, his upcoming exhibition with high-profile collectors from around the world. Pieces like these were the ones that ensured his gallery remained the top name in the city's art scene. Just as Gregory made his way back to the main gallery, he was met by one of his assistants, a young woman named Clara, who had been overseeing the event for the evening. She was tall, slender, and impeccably dressed, and she had a keen sense of what worked in the art world. "Gregory, that artist Elias Taylor, he's, still in the lobby, looking over the other pieces," Clara said, her tone unsure. "He seems a bit out of place." "Out of place?" Gregory repeated, eyebrow raised. "Did he actually try to sell me that monstrosity of a painting?" Clara hesitated. "Well, no. He didn't quite offer to sell it to you, but he did say something strange." Gregory's curiosity was piqued. "Strange?" He leaned against the edge of a marble counter, waiting for her to elaborate. "He said that I'd see, that I'd understand what he was doing. That I'd see the value." Clara lowered her voice. It sounded a little arrogant, honestly. Gregory's lips curled into a smug smile. "Arrogant? Please. He's a hobbyist, Clara. I've seen his type before. Trying to make a name for themselves, using shock tactics. He's no different from all the others who think they're misunderstood artists." Clara hesitated, but then, sensing she had little chance to sway his opinion, shrugged. "Well, I just thought you should know he's still here." Gregory nodded and motioned for her to go ahead and continue with the event preparations. His gaze drifted back toward the lobby, where Elias stood admiring some of the more conventional works of art on display. He looked like he was trying too hard to fit in, his casual outfit at odds with the polished environment. Gregory couldn't help but scoff. Elias had the audacity to think that his piece could be more than an afterthought in a place like this. If Gregory had his way, he'd be sent on his way shortly, his offer to display his work forgotten. But for some reason, Gregory felt a small twinge of annoyance in his chest. Was it jealousy? Or perhaps the nagging feeling that Elias's confidence was an affront to his own sense of authority? Marlowe cleared his throat, brushing aside the thought. He knew art, and he knew success. He had decades of experience in the industry, building his gallery into a powerhouse. Elias was just another artist who didn't understand the game. He crossed the room, his footsteps quiet but purposeful. Elias had his back turned, still immersed in the art, and seemed to be lost in thought. As Gregory approached, he put on his most practiced, condescending smile. "Well, Mr. Taylor," he began, his voice smooth but dripping with patronization, "it seems you're quite taken with our collection. I do hope you find it to your liking." Elias turned around slowly, his face calm, but there was a hint of knowing in his expression. "It's all very safe," he said, his voice tinged with a touch of amusement. Gregory blinked. "Safe?" "Yeah," Elias said, gesturing toward the paintings with his hand. "I mean, they're technically good, sure. But there's nothing here that makes you feel something new. It's all been done before, and it's just safe. It doesn't challenge you." Marlowe felt his jaw tighten. Well, art isn't always about being challenged. Sometimes it's about appreciating what's already been done, celebrating the masters. Elias chuckled softly. Of course. The masters, right. The ones who fit neatly into the approved boxes. But that's not the only way to make art. Not everything has to be safe. Sometimes, you have to break things open. Gregory's temper flared, and his smile became even more exaggerated. "Well, I suppose you'd know all about that, wouldn't you? I mean, look at your work." He waved dismissively toward the back room, where Elias's piece still stood. "It's a bunch of random colors thrown together without any real structure." "You think it's revolutionary? Bold?" "No. It's nothing more than noise." Elias stood there for a moment, unshaken. His eyes didn't even flash with anger. He was calm, almost disturbingly so. Finally, he spoke, his words cutting through the tension like a sharp knife. "You don't get it," Elias said softly. "But you will. You'll see. One day, when my art's hanging in the finest museums, and people are lining up to buy it, you'll look back at this moment and regret turning your back on it." Gregory could hardly contain his laughter. I'm not in the habit of regretting my decisions, Mr. Taylor. I have a reputation to uphold. And I don't see your work having any place in the galleries of the future. Elias gave him one last look, quiet, calm, and strangely knowing. Then, without another word, he turned and walked toward the door. But just before exiting, he paused. I'll give you some time to think about it, he said. You'll come around. With that, Elias left the gallery, his footsteps echoing as the door closed behind him. Gregory stood there, watching the door, his thoughts swirling. He couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just dismissed something important, something that, deep down, he might actually regret. But he pushed it aside. After all, he was Gregory Marlowe. The art world bent to his will, not the other way around. He straightened his tie, shrugged off the unsettling feeling, and turned back to the gallery's prized pieces. There was no place for upstarts like Elias Taylor in his world. And as long as he was the one in charge, that would never change. It was a week later when Gregory received the phone call. He had been sitting in his office, finalizing the details for his next big exhibition, when his assistant, Clara, entered with an envelope in hand. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and sealed with a formal-looking wax emblem. No return address, no sender's name, just an elegant M stamped on the seal. Gregory raised an eyebrow as she handed it to him. What's this? He asked, his fingers quickly breaking the seal. Clara shrugged. I have no idea. It arrived this morning. It's addressed to you. Gregory opened the envelope, pulling out a single sheet of high-quality paper. As he read, his eyes narrowed. Dear Mr. Marlowe, I trust this letter finds you well. I wanted to thank you for your time last week, and I thought you might appreciate the opportunity to further understand the value of the work I offered. Enclosed, you will find a list of upcoming private auctions and galleries where my pieces will be showcased. Perhaps you would like to join us and see firsthand the kind of interest my art has generated. Best regards. Elias Taylor. Gregory put the letter down, his mind racing. He had been expecting some kind of follow-up from Elias, but not like this. Private auctions? Galleries? Was Elias Taylor really that connected? He scoffed. It must be a joke, he thought. There's no way anyone would want his chaotic pieces on display in high-end circles. Still, curiosity gnawed at him. He had to check it out, just to confirm that Elias was simply another misguided artist trying to sell his dreams. If nothing else, it would give him a chance to laugh at the absurdity. A couple of days later, Gregory found himself at one of the private auctions listed in Elias's letter. It was an exclusive event, filled with wealthy collectors and art investors. He didn't want to admit it to himself, but he felt a tinge of excitement at the prospect of seeing Elias's work showcased among others. As much as he wanted to dismiss it, something about the artist's confidence lingered in his mind. The auction house was filled with the hushed whispers of high society, a sea of tuxedos, sparkling dresses, and well-heeled guests clinking their glasses of champagne. Gregory moved through the crowd, nodding politely to a few familiar faces. He kept an eye out for the art pieces that were about to be sold. When the auction finally began, Gregory took a seat in the front row, his gaze fixed on the auctioneer. He was ready to witness the farce he was certain Elias's work would turn out to be. Then, as if on cue, the first piece to be revealed was Elias's. A large canvas, its colors intense and chaotic, much like the one Gregory had dismissed in his gallery. But this time, there was something different about it. The piece, though abstract, radiated a raw energy, something that struck deep, that pulled at the emotions in a way that only the best art could. It wasn't just noise. It had layers, complexities that begged to be understood. The bidding began. Gregory's heart rate quickened. The piece was being offered for an exorbitant starting price, and to his shock, the bids were flying in from all corners of the room. One by one, wealthy patrons raised their paddles, each willing to pay more and more for the piece that had, until just days ago, seemed like nothing more than a series of random strokes of paint. $500,000, someone called out, and the crowd murmured in surprise. $600,000, shouted another. Gregory blinked in disbelief. The price was escalating faster than he could comprehend. How could this be happening? This wasn't supposed to be happening. The auctioneer continued to call the bids, and soon the piece was being sold for well over $1 million. A wave of awe rippled through the crowd. Gregory felt the weight of it. His mind spun with confusion. This was no fluke. As the auction ended, and Elias's piece was sold to a distinguished buyer, Gregory stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape. He couldn't fathom what had just occurred. His fingers tightened around the armrests of his chair, his breath shallow. The realization hit him hard. Elias Taylor was not some rookie artist. He wasn't just some up-and-comer hoping to make a name for himself. He was a legitimate force in the art world. And Gregory had dismissed him. It wasn't just the auction. It wasn't just one painting. As Gregory made his way out of the event, he overheard murmurs in the crowd. People were talking about Elias's upcoming show at a prestigious international museum. There were whispers about private commissions, exclusive showings, and even a bidding war for the rights to his next collection. The world had already seen the value of Elias's work. Gregory had been blind to it. But now, the truth was inescapable. Elias Taylor was a game-changer. By the time Gregory returned to the Marlowe Gallery, he was no longer sure of his footing. He had been so sure that his gallery, his connections, and his reputation were untouchable. But Elias's art was setting the art world on fire, and Gregory had been completely wrong to dismiss it, or worse, to mock it. Still, he couldn't bring himself to admit it to anyone. Not yet. He'd need time to process this new reality, to accept that he had been fooled. That a self-taught, raw, unrefined artist had done what he never thought possible, commanded the art world's attention, and turned the tables on him in a way that left him stunned. The weeks that followed the auction were a blur of conflicting emotions for Gregory. His confidence had taken a hit. The art world, which had always seemed so predictable, so neatly structured, was suddenly unrecognizable. Elias Taylor's work wasn't just making waves, it was creating a tsunami, and Gregory was left helpless, watching it crash all around him. Gregory's initial dismissive attitude toward Elias now seemed like a foolish mistake. Each day brought new reports of Elias's artwork being featured in high-profile galleries and auction houses across Europe and the Americas. Critics hailed his work as groundbreaking, revolutionary even. The most surprising part? Elias's pieces were commanding millions, far more than Gregory had ever imagined possible for someone like him. Meanwhile, the gallery owner's own exhibitions had struggled to maintain the same level of excitement and attention. The patrons who used to flock to the Marlowe Gallery for its curated collections now seemed more interested in Elias's work than anything Gregory could offer. It stung to watch his gallery lose ground, but it hurt even more to admit he'd underestimated the young artist. One evening, as Gregory sat in his office going through the financial reports, a familiar name caught his eye. It was a list of the top buyers from the latest auction, and there, in bold print, was Elias Taylor. The artist had not only sold his own work, but had also begun purchasing significant pieces from other emerging artists. In some ways, Elias was becoming a buyer in the world Gregory once ruled, and that was a shift Gregory could not ignore. In the days that followed, Elias's influence only seemed to grow. He was featured in art magazines, interviewed by curators, and invited to join prominent panels and discussions about the future of modern art. He was quickly becoming a fixture in the elite circles Gregory had once dominated. But the most shocking news came one morning when Elias announced he was opening his own gallery in the heart of the city. The announcement sent shockwaves through the art community. This wasn't just some bold move, it was a direct challenge to Gregory's territory. When the news broke, it was like a knife to Gregory's chest. His first instinct was to dismiss it, to laugh it off as another of Elias's gimmicks. But as the days passed, the implications of the move became clearer. Elias was positioning himself as not just an artist, but a force in the art market. He was building his own empire. And Gregory was being left behind. Gregory couldn't help but wonder, how had he not seen it coming? Elias was not just some up-and-coming artist. He was a visionary with the kind of foresight and business savvy that Gregory had always assumed he possessed. It wasn't long before Gregory received an unexpected phone call from Elias. The voice on the other end of the line was calm, almost businesslike. "Gregory," Elias said, "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important, but I wanted to personally invite you to the opening of my new gallery. I thought it might be nice to catch up." Gregory's stomach churned. The invitation sounded polite enough, but there was a hidden edge to it. A power play. Elias was rubbing his success in his face, and Gregory knew it. Yet, he couldn't bring himself to ignore the offer. A part of him needed to see Elias's new venture up close, to see if it was truly as impressive as the rumors suggested. "Sure," Gregory replied, forcing a smile. "I'll be there." The night of the gallery opening arrived, and Gregory found himself standing outside the doors of Elias's new space. It was located in one of the most prestigious parts of the city, surrounded by the kinds of high-end boutiques and establishments that only the wealthiest patrons frequented. The building itself was sleek and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows that gave a glimpse of the immaculate interior. As he entered, Gregory was immediately struck by the atmosphere. The gallery was minimalist, yet sophisticated. Every inch of the space had been thoughtfully designed, and the walls were adorned with a carefully curated selection of Elias's latest works. There were no over-the-top displays, no flashy gimmicks. Just art. And it was breathtaking. The guests were equally impressive, wealthy investors, curators, and critics, all mingling and discussing the future of art in hushed tones. Gregory felt like a fish out of water. This was Elias's world now, and he was merely a spectator. Elias spotted Gregory across the room and made his way over, his expression a mix of polite professionalism and quiet confidence. He was dressed in a sharp, tailored suit that exuded both elegance and a sense of authority. "Gregory," Elias said, extending his hand. "It's good to see you here." Gregory forced a smile and shook his hand. "Elias. I must admit, I didn't expect this." Elias raised an eyebrow. "You didn't expect success?" "No, not like this," Gregory replied, his voice betraying his envy. "I underestimated you. I thought you were just another experiment." Elias chuckled softly. "I'm glad I proved you wrong." Gregory was momentarily speechless. The young artist's confidence was unshakable, and Gregory couldn't help but admire it. Elias was no longer the underdog he had dismissed so carelessly. He was the one with the power now. As the evening progressed, Gregory wandered through the gallery, trying to make sense of everything. He overheard discussions about private collectors who had already expressed interest in purchasing several of Elias's works, and the talk was always the same: Elias wasn't just an artist. He was a businessman. A visionary who had understood the art market in a way Gregory never had. By the time the evening drew to a close, Gregory knew one thing for certain: Elias Taylor was not just an artist he had overlooked. He was a force in the art world, a player who had already surpassed Gregory's understanding of what it meant to succeed. As he left the gallery that night, Gregory's mind was racing. The landscape had shifted beneath his feet, and there was no denying it: Elias had won. Gregory was no longer the one in control. But as he walked through the quiet streets, he couldn't help but wonder, could he still find a way to adapt, to reclaim his position in the art world, or had Elias already rendered him obsolete?